tired people.
I'm not hating, I'm just jealous.
You know why I can't
That's
make the
what it is.
19th? Because I have to go get the new, get all the paperwork for the new trailer Mr. Cook just bought, to haul the RGR to West Virginia.
Priorities.
And we have to leave, we're leaving on the 20th, and so the people are pushing the paperwork through a little quick so I can come back and get it on the 19th, because we have it done.
There we go.
Yeah, I was like, the man just seems to think, you know, I'm just,
At his second call.
We're at 5 o'clock. Not really, it's a work session, you don't have to do anything. And then Jacob will take over the helm from there and round things out for the evening. So with that, Matt, I'm happy to introduce you. Big round of applause from everyone. Would you like me to jump right in?
Yeah, would you like me anywhere in particular? Does it matter?
Anywhere you like.
Okay, sounds good. Good technology contact was running to grab the...
Well, the camera's right up there on the ceiling that I just pointed to, so
Okay.
it's catching you.
All right. So yeah, my name is Matt Parkinson. I'm with Policy Analytics. Policy Analytics is a small business that provides support for school districts and local governments around fiscal matters. I'm a former business manager, so I've sat in Jacob's shoes. I've been with Policy Analytics since January, but this is my first school year. I'm just recognizing while standing on your campus. This is my first school year in a long time, not being at a school district on the first day of school. So that's
Congratulations.
kind of missing that first day interview. Actually came here with you all today. So I'm going to get that out this quick here.
Sure.
So broadly, what we're planning on talking through today is school funding for Indian Creek, property tax reform over the last couple of years, and what it's going to mean for your school district. We work with you on cash flows, so we're going to take a look at your specific cash flow picture, what it's looked like for the last few years, the trajectory that you're on, kind of give you an item or two that I think should be on the board's and the district's radar for the years ahead. The first time. And look, in my experience as we go through these, kind of interaction works really well. So if there's something that we go through that catches your attention that you'd like to take a look at a little more in depth, let me know. I'll try to keep a lot of this to sort of the executive level. And I've got the paper copy certified as well. So we've gone through a season of change in the property tax space over the last couple of years in Indiana, especially from 2025. So what we have summarized here is the key reforms from Senate Enrolled Act 1 as they pertain to property taxes for school districts. Most important one for Indian Creek, well, really two that are most important for Indian Creek. One is this first one that's listed on here, which is homestead deductions. So we as homeowners are eligible for deductions. So just terminology-wise, we've got a gross assessed value, which is roughly the market value of your property, and then deductions that are applied. The structure of deductions is changing, and the net effect is going to be that net assessed values over time we anticipate are going to come down between now and 2031. We've got a couple slides to take a look at that specifically here in just a few moments, but that's sort of the key takeaway is sort of the structural change that we're all navigating is we've been used to, as gross assessed values go up, net assessed values go up. And for a few years, we're going to see a break in that pattern, where even as gross assessed values go up, we're going to see net assessed values that decline. And that's driven largely by that first bullet there. The second bullet is relevant as well. 2% properties, that refers to the constitutional cap. 2% properties include farmland and residences not owner-occupied, are eligible for deductions for the first time this year. They've got a 6% deduction, and that grows between now and 2031 to a 1/3 deduction. The other one that's most significant for Indian Creek and for heavily residential communities is the third bullet, which is the homestead residential credit. So we as homeowners this year, were eligible for a credit for the first time. It was the very last piece on your property tax bill. It was 10% of your property tax bill, capped at $300. Benefit to the taxpayer, but it's a revenue reduction to the school districts and other municipal government compared to that credit. These other pieces are more minor in terms of the impact they have on the school district. Just briefly, business personal property, starting next year, we have a new de minimis threshold that exempts that property from taxation. That's business machinery and equipment. Current threshold is $80,000, next year is $2 million. So it's all to say, essentially, small businesses will be largely falling off the rolls when it comes to paying taxes on their personal property. The larger one is 30% floor eliminated. Again, not a big impact in this community. That's going to let larger enterprises depreciate that equipment further. The way that farmland is assessed was modified, essentially to keep those assessed values in check over the next few years. And that was that was a reaction to kind of a run-up in farmland assessed values over a few years. So that was a piece of what the General Assembly opted, this last piece is really significant in the scheme of things, modification of deductions to credits. The overall takeaway, with the one exception of that 10% $300 credit, is all of these pieces are going to be constraints on the level at which net assessed value grows. So again, just kind of emphasize the point. We anticipate net assessed value coming down over the next few years. It's just a structural change in the way that we manage property taxes here in Indiana. Okay, so like I mentioned, we work with your school district on cash flows. So what we're doing is taking a look at your major funds, education and operations, your revenues, expenditures, your actual data historically. The orange is the year that we're in right now, so on a calendar year basis, and then the years moving forward. There's a couple pieces that, I really kind of a couple pieces that I want to just sort of point out. This is an outstanding piece right here. I want to make sure to give a lot of credit to you all as board, as administration, DICM. You all are doing a fantastic job in terms of managing the budgets. And the reason I'm pointing that number right there is the district's on track this year to run at a surplus of about $900,000, was what we noticed. The surplus, it's essentially revenues versus expenditures. You're pulling in a little bit more in revenues than you're spending this year. That's an important thing to do because of the challenges that are coming here in the next few years. So the school district, we're going to take a look at just the slide two from now at what your cash balance has done historically. You have pretty good cash balances overall. That's the bottom line here, 28.8%. Statewide norm is about 35%, so you're a little bit below kind of the statewide average or statewide norm in terms of the amount of cash on hand. You're growing your cash right now, which is a good thing. We're going to talk. Local income taxes is going to be a big deal in this community. There's going to be a direct loss of revenue to the school district starting in 2029, a little over $400,000 per year. So the surplus that you're running right now is preparing you for some of these challenges that are coming here in a few years when that source of your revenue is going to go away. But to me, we do these conversations with school boards all over the state, as you can imagine. We don't get to have a ton of conversations where you guys are running a surplus and you're doing a great job of it. Oftentimes, it's a much more challenging conversation of, if you're running a deficit, it's going to be more challenging. So again, I just want to offer kudos to Jacob and Dr. Secchi. You did a great job. This is just sort of a different way of looking at it. I do think it illustrates the challenge that's coming. I'll also talk a little bit about where the school district's been. This is the cash balance in your major funds. 2021, 2022, it was around that $7 million range. The district spent down quite a bit in 2023. You've grown it since then, back to a place that's, I think, healthier, and you're on track for that to continue. You'll notice that that peak year is 2028, and that's not a coincidence, because 2029 is the year that direct revenue from local income taxes comes in. So, look, I don't think probably we're going to look up and you guys are going to have 8 years of running deficit. I think we're going to take corrective action to really kind of stabilize that. But we sort of do this as an illustrative exercise of, this is a serious situation that any school district is facing until the source of revenue. And we'll have a slide or two on local income taxes here this week. Revenue and expenditure history. So we like to do a lot of peer comparisons, taking a look at how school corporations are doing versus their peers. Here we have your enrollment peers. The school district's right above you and right below you in 2025, and the dollar amount spent per student out of your major funds. Purple is the education fund, blue is the operations fund. There's a couple school districts on there that have operating referenda. Statewide, school districts are spending about $12,000 per student or spent about $12,000 per student in 2025. Here at Indian Creek, we spent just under $10,000 per student. So you're running a pretty lean operation, to say the least. This largely reflects the resources that a school district has. Districts receive revenue, districts turn around and spend the revenue. So some school districts, see West Lafayette kind of far into that. West Lafayette has a healthy tax base and an operating revenue. They also get a little bit more in state funding than Indian Creek does. But it largely tracks the revenue, but it's not easy to operate financially in the school district. You guys are doing that pretty well. This is taking a look at property tax rates, again, among peer districts, not 100% the same, but there's a lot of overlap. Property tax rates in 2026, statewide average property tax rate is about 87 cents. That doesn't count a referendum fund. If we include a referendum fund on that, statewide average property tax rate is about $1.02. The median is about 99 cents. Your school district's at 87 cents. You're kind of right around that state norm in terms of districts that don't operate an operating revenue. And this is kind of similar data, taking a look at your county peers. You operate, of course, within Johnson County and Morgan County, and so take a look at the school districts there. You know, we've got one district that's a bit of an outlier. They're also a real tiny district with some unique kind of circumstances. Otherwise, you know, it is kind of fairly tightly bundled between that kind of $10,000 to $12,000 range. The only peer that's spending just ever so slightly less is Center Grove. And I will say, too, a metric like this tends to favor a larger district. There's economies of scale that come with running a slightly larger district. So I think you're right where you're at a great place on the target list. And same kind of concept, tax rates within the counties. Get at that 89-cent level, 87 is the state average. This isn't going to come as a surprise. The county school districts that have passed an operating referendum, slightly higher tax rates. Those that haven't, slightly lower tax rates. Any questions about what we've seen so far? Okay. This slide, I think, is an important one to understand for any given school district where their major expenditures lie. So what we're taking a look at here is your sort of non-negotiable operations fund expenditures. Those things that you have to pay for: transportation, utilities, property, and casualty insurance. And the comparison we're making here is on a per-student basis. How much is the school district spending on those components versus the dollar amount that the school district is collecting out of property taxes in the operations fund. So in 2025, your school district was right around 80%, meaning 80% of your property tax money is going to those pieces. Beyond that, you still have a lot of things you have to pay for out of the operations fund. Some of your technology comes out of the operations fund, you have to pay for custodians, some of your building projects, human resources, central office. Those are all the things that get covered with kind of the main piece there. The other kind of key thing to take a look at is how the school district is doing on this expenditure within those categories compared to the column on the right. You're right there, right around the state average in terms of dollar amount being spent on transportation, not far off on property and casualty. Your property and casualty premiums have been going up quite a bit in the last few years. I think almost everybody's. At one point, I know we talked about this, Dr. Kasecki, Jacob. Utilities, you guys are doing great in terms of utilities relative to what's the kind of state average is. Utilities are hard to control. You can't control it all the rate. You have some control over the usage, but this is indicative of some local discipline in that space. Okay, I mentioned that we're going to come back and take a look at cash balances. So this is taking a look at all school districts around the state and their cash balances and their major funds divided by expenditures in their major funds. 2022, Indian Creek was kind of right in that mid-30s range, which for now, at this point, is really kind of the state average. That cash balance really dipped pretty significantly in 2023, and then you've grown it back. Again, we're on a trajectory in 2026, running a surplus. You expect to see that number go up again this year. Smaller school districts, broadly speaking, need a little bit more cash. Larger school districts, broadly speaking, can give out a little bit less. That just kind of comes from sort of the risk profile that smaller districts take on. Right? A boiler here doesn't cost a whole lot more than a boiler in a school district or two school districts north of you. Because the deductions were, it's kind of the pace at which those deductions come on is estimated. Because you're so heavily residential, you're a little bit more exposed than a community that has maybe a more balanced property tax base. But on the flip side, as the state, for instance, takes on property tax reform in the business space, which is a very real possibility, you're a little bit less exposed in those areas. I just think it's important for school districts to understand what their tax base looks like. This is a policy decision that you all have already made. This is a snapshot of kind of the slide we were using a couple months ago, but it's going to sound familiar right now. That new 10% $300 credit, you had a decision you could make of whether you wanted that credit to apply for this year to the operations fund and to the debt service fund, or exclusively to the operations fund. Starting in 2027, it's exclusively the operations fund. About 220 school districts out of 290 opted in. You all opted in. If I were a business manager, I would have encouraged you to opt in as well. So what that means is for this year, you're going to be in that chart on the left. And next year, everybody's going to be in the chart on the right. But really kind of the key takeaway for your school district, independent of where it's going, is the $64,000 that we see in 2025 is the school district circuit breaker loss for 2025. Very little. In 2026, we see the height of that bar jump up quite a bit. And what that's telling us is that the taxpayers in your community are benefiting from, at least from your portion of it, about $500,000 of relief via that credit. Which again, to the benefit of the taxpayer, but it's a challenge for your school district's collections. So again, those are the key takeaways. That credit's really going to hinder revenue, at least for the short term. Now it's baked in, and starting next year, it's all going to apply to the operations fund. This is just kind of meant to illustrate timing. I won't dwell here a ton. DLGF releases estimates of circuit breaker loss. Jacob, by the way, if you've seen it, they just posted it in the last day, so I haven't. They essentially forecasted that your loss is going to be the same as this year. So on a gut check level, that feels right. We'll do our own estimate, which is that second column. We'll do our own estimate once we have certified net assessed values for both Morgan County and Johnson County. And then by next spring, we'll give you one more estimate. At that point, it's pretty dialed in with where the state's at. But this is kind of a tool that business managers, superintendents use while this budget. You need to plan for this to be a piece of your operations fund that you don't select next year. For this year, it's a little over $500,000. Okay. This slide captures the three key changes from the 2026 legislative session that impact property taxes from a school district perspective. The first is that the maximum levy growth quotient grew this year. So the MLGQ is the amount by which your operations fund levy is allowed to grow. It goes through a formula we're going to look at here in a slide or two. It's been artificially constrained at state level to 4% for 3 years running, 2024, 2025, 2026. The General Assembly opted to let that constraint expire this year. So we go back to the regular statutory formula, which means that for 2027, the maximum levy growth quotient is going to be 6%. So that lets your operations fund levy grow just a little bit more than it otherwise would have. Same is going to be true of your overlapping units. So the town's general fund, the county's general fund, we're able to grow by 6% instead of 4%. So we're looking at kind of the slide here. The one on the left illustrates what it would have been at 4%. The one on the right is what we think your reality is going to be at 6%. Second major change is that the timing for local income tax was moved from 2028 to 2029. I do think that's a critical factor, like I mentioned, for your school district, for all the Johnson County school districts, for that matter, all the Morgan County school districts. It's just going to make a dramatic difference in terms of that sort of supplemental piece of revenue that your school district has access to. And then the third one is the one that we just covered, which is that 10% credit now applies to all of the operations fund. But I do want to stick to a piece that wasn't legislatively driven, but this slide I think illustrates it well. That bottom row, what we're doing on that bottom row is forecasting what's going to happen with tax rates. And so the assumptions that we're using for your school community is that the debt service levy stays flat, and then the operations fund grows by the maximum levy growth quotient. So I want to kind of go back to the beginning when we talked about those deductions coming on and that likely driving net assessed values down. Your tax rate is fractional. Okay? In the numerator, you've got the property tax levy, which is the dollars you raise. And in the denominator, you've got your net assessed value. And so in any given year, if we hold that numerator stable, but we drive down that denominator via lower net assessed values, what that means is tax rates are likely to rise. That's not specific to any creek. That's a pattern that we think we're going to see all around the state between now and 2034, just as a function of the outcomes when Senate rolled Act 1. So that's not to say that you or anybody needs to make any specific policy decision. Just that's what we're going to expect to see for the next few years. Is unless a school district or other type of local government reduces its revenue, which wouldn't be typical, especially for the operations fund, we're going to anticipate seeing tax rates rise around the state. Okay, I mentioned the MLGQ. I do think this piece is important to sort of take a look at in terms of just future planning. This is the formula that the state runs through every year. They take a snapshot of statewide non-farm personal income year over year, create a ratio, add 6 years of that ratio together, divide by 6, and that's the MLGQ. So again, the amount by which your operational fund can grow. The piece that I want to point out in this formula is this is a 6-year rolling average. We think back to 6 years ago, we were kind of part of the pandemic. For all the challenges that we were facing, incomes did rise in that period of time. So over the next 2 years, we're going to lose 2 of our higher growth years out of this formula and replace them with numbers that we can't know yet, but we assume numbers that are close to what we had last few years. Which is all to say, this is almost certainly the only year of a 6% maximum levy growth quotient. Next year, assuming that the General Assembly leaves this formula the same, we anticipate that getting back into the 5% range and potentially getting below 5% after that. So you take your higher operations fund levy, most districts will in the year that you have it, but beyond that, we anticipate it's going to get back to kind of normal growth. Okay, just want to take a couple slides to take a look at deductions. I think this is really important illustrative content from a sort of taxpayer's perspective to understand what's going to happen with our tax bills as homeowners. So today we have 2 deductions on homestead properties, a fixed deduction and a percentage-based deduction called the supplemental. The fixed deduction in 2026 is $48,000. So that means if you've got a $300,000 house, first thing that happens is $48,000 is subtracted off of that. And then a percentage-based deduction is applied. And for this year, it's 40%. So formula-wise, you take off the $48,000, multiply the remainder by 40%, that's a supplemental deduction, and that gets you to the net assessed value. What we're going to be doing over the next 5 years is that fixed deduction is going to work its way down to 0. The percentage base is going to grow, so that by 2031 is a 2/3 deduction. It's honestly going to be a simpler system by the time we're there, but this is really what's driving homestead net assessed values to be kept in check or even likely to decline over a period of years. And this slide, I think, illustrates the impact of that, in a way that's, pretty manageable. So what we're looking at here is the net assessed value for a given homestead property at various gross assessed values at different points in time. So that green line at the top is $1 million homestead value. We're looking at $1 million homestead. In 2026, we take off that $48,000 deduction, and that 40% fixed. It's got a net assessed value of $571,000. On the inverse side of that, down the bottom, we've got teal. Teal is a $50,000 property. Orange right above it is a $100,000 property. If we think about what's happening here, the high-value homes benefit from a percentage-based deduction. The lower-value homes benefit more from a fixed deduction. So as that fixed component phases out, and we get to this percentage-based, it reduces the net assessed value more the higher the value of the homestead property is. For those lower homestead properties, actually it's the case. That fixed deduction is carrying so much weight that their net assessed value is going to rise just a little bit. By the time we get to $150,000 home, that's not the case. So the $1 million home always pays more. $1 million home always pays more than the $100,000 home pays. The gap in what those homes pay is going to get narrower 5 years from now. All of these factors combined, with such a heavily residential community, this is the reason that we anticipate that net assessed values are going to be kept in check in your community and most places in the state. Okay. Any questions before we get to income taxes? Local income taxes. Local income taxes, I think, have been underappreciated in the conversation about tax reform. All 92 counties in Indiana have a county-based income tax rate. The income tax rate serves a variety of purposes, but as it applies to school districts, in former Cadgett counties, which is one of 2 old types of income taxes that we have, and Johnson's a former Cadgett county, and Morgan's a former Cadgett county. Cadgett-Chancellor County is just a gross income tax. 2016 and earlier, we had a different system. So in former Cadgett counties, school districts are eligible for a distribution of local income tax dollars. It's called certified shares. Your school district's case adds up to a bit over $400,000, so it's a pretty serious part of your revenue. There's 2 distributions that add up to it. all things considered, over the course of the year, you're going to receive a little bit over $400,000. This is a kind of the way that we're taking a look at this in some school districts. Historically, 2021 through 2025, using your actual numbers, these are your property tax collections and your local income tax collections. So you collected in 2025 $3.55 million in property taxes in the operations fund and $461,000 in local income taxes in the same funds. If we were to extend this out, 2026, 2027, 2028, we're going to look pretty similar. That revenue source is still coming in. Starting in 2029, it'll be essentially the same column, but just the teal piece, the orange component of it is going to be gone. There's nothing at this point that your counties can do about it. It's just the way that the General Assembly modified local income tax structure. I do think it's an active conversation, and part of the evidence for that is it got moved from 2028 to 2029. And we know from conversations with legislators, they're aware this is an issue. Some larger school districts are going to lose a couple $1 million off of this, but it's all relative. It's just going to be a big deal for potential use of communities. So I just think from a long-range perspective, the impact of Senate Enrolled Act 1, it truly is localized. Your community is impacted because of changes in residential property. There's some communities where charter school sharing is going to be a big deal. That's not the case here. There's some communities where changes in business personal property is going to be a big deal. That's not as much here. It really is a localized impact, but for you all, when it comes to long-range budget planning, this system is important to use it. Okay. Assessed value projections. I'm actually going to go to the next slide, which is 25, and then work our way back to slide 24. So every year, the county auditor certifies net assessed values for your school district and every local government in the county. We actually know at this point your Morgan County assessed values. We're waiting to find out your Johnson County assessed values. Really just kind of focusing on this blue line here, because I think it illustrates what the school district we think is going to be navigating in the years ahead. So if you look historically, we had relatively flat assessed value between, say, 2016 and 2020. It started to grow after that. Grew quite a bit there for a few years, and then in 2026 kind of hit its peak. We think in 2027, once we know your Johnson County assessed values, we anticipate that you're going to be down ever so slightly. Maybe break even, depending upon what happens with local AVs, but it's not going to be the kind of growth that we've seen in the last few years. And then the years after that, what we're anticipating is that the pace of those deductions coming on is going to outpace your growth in gross assessed values. So again, coming back to kind of that tax rate equation, if net assessed values come down, not specific to any group, just anywhere in the state, if net assessed value is going to come down, that's going to put pressure on the property tax rate itself. It just changes one of those two pieces of that fraction. Now, it's not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen to the taxpayer. Keep in mind the taxpayer has those new deductions coming on. You have higher deductions to offset a higher tax rate. In the taxpayer's case, it's often relatively neutral. So going back, slide 24, what's driving this is taking a look at gross assessed values, so assessed values before deductions. That navy chart on the left is really almost your entire school district story. We know this outside of property tax space, that a $200,000 home 5 years ago is a $300,000 home today. And that's what we're seeing reflected in our assessed values as well. It's meant, even if it doesn't do it perfectly, it's meant to track market values. So really we're seeing those gross assessed values grow. Broken out within the counties, so somewhere in the neighborhood of 70-30, roughly, is your split, maybe a little bit higher than that. In terms of Johnson County versus Morgan County, the interesting pattern that we saw in 2026, if you notice the height of the individual components themselves, looking at 2025 to 2026, Johnson County net assessed values, certified net assessed values for your school community went from $716 million to $802 million. Morgan County net assessed values for your community went from $344 to $329. So you saw robust growth in Johnson County and a decline in Morgan County. We already have the Morgan County data for 2027, and it's up in your community 3% roughly, 4%. We've seen the underlying data from Johnson County, and we anticipate that Johnson County is likely going to be down compared to last year. And so we're seeing this inverse, where last year Johnson County grew a lot, Morgan County shrunk. This year Morgan County is up. We think Johnson County is going to shrink, maybe hold steady, but likely shrink just a little bit. Overall, we anticipate net assessed value going back just one slide. I say this at risk of being wrong, but we anticipate that your net assessed value is going to be roughly flat, possibly even down a little bit across the school districts. And again, we think that's going to be the pattern through 2031. So just a couple kind of closing pieces for the board, for the administration to contemplate. It really has changed quite a bit, the way that property taxes work, the way that school funding works over the last 2 years. And we don't think it's probably done yet. Same headlines that you all see. We think 2027 is going to be another General Assembly session where property taxes spark conversations. And if nothing else, of course, it's going to be a budget year as well. It's happened every 2 years, so we know at minimum the school district is going to be impacted by that. Really important for districts to be engaged in strategic planning around these realities, especially in your case, that local income tax piece is critical, and understanding what's happening with your local tax base. And that middle bullet is the one that we often like to emphasize. It truly is local. You may talk to a school district in Marion County, and their story is going to feel a lot different from what you're navigating. Or you talk to Brown County, and their story is a little bit different from what you're doing. So again, just to wrap it up with kind of the cash flow piece, we like to cover these pieces of it. So again, just kind of coming back to the cash flow piece, this is what ties it all together. Your school district, I think, is doing a fantastic job in terms of running that surplus, managing your budget conservatively. We do have a challenge up ahead in 2029 when that local income tax component falls away. So I think it's really critical that the district be engaged in forward planning for what that's going to look like when that comes. It also may be a good idea just advocacy-wise to ensure that your local representatives understand what this piece of funding is for your community. I guess same data, just taking a look at it from a line chart perspective. So that's largely the data that we prepared. Happy to answer any questions.
This is so informative. Thank you for bringing it to such a personalized and understandable level. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Happy to do it. Okay.
Good. Man, thank you. The rules change and most don't understand. It's a different game we're playing, but we're doing the best we can.
Yeah.
Was it 38 districts now are officially on the ballot for referendum?
38 is the official count.
There's an official count?
Yep.
And we're not one of them.
Right.
So I just want to make sure I said that on camera. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And obviously, we can go over this at any time since we have all the data.
My pleasure. And of course, if there's any support you all need, you go through the budgeting process or so on, we're happy to be that resource for you.
Thank you. Jacob, you're on.
I think that this would be a perfect lead into the budget this year on the DLGF side of things with that gateway. So I would like to just take a brief moment to go over the budget process, how we approach it, what the budget numbers look like for 2027, and then how does that compare to the 2026 budget, and then if there was any questions. Just once again, the budget process itself is determined by state statute every year. There are usually changes every 2 years or annually. It just depends on the year. The whole purpose of it is to establish maximums on what the districts can spend for the next upcoming year. So when I'm setting this up, I'm looking at July through December expenditures, I'm estimating those, and then I'm looking at the following year and estimating those as well. So I'm essentially looking at an 18-month window. So going through that, we then have our workshop here. We have our hearing in September, our adoption in October. and then hopefully DLTF approval in November, December. So as kind of Matt mentioned, we do take a conservative approach also with this piece as well. So looking at what I'm going to propose, the 2027 budget, for the education fund, I have $23,641,975. That is up a little bit from last year, but mainly for salaries, benefits, all the other items he had mentioned as well. For debt service, I have $6.7 million. Those come directly from our debt payments. In 2027, we do have the 2020 bonds falling off, and some of our other payments are a little bit lower, but it is offset with anticipated net AV going down next year. So that's it with debt service. In the operations fund, I have $7.4 million. That's up slightly from last year, but not by very much at all. And then in the rainy day fund, I've got $589,000. So overall, there's just a slight decrease from last year, but it's mainly due to the decrease in debt service and rainy day, not in education or operations. All of those numbers are advertised high to protect us for next year, as we've done every year.
So that's one of the big pieces is waiting for, of course, our ADM. That's going to play the role in the education fund enrollment today. We still haven't processed out our withdrawals. Some of the students that are on our books still, if they leave the district, a lot of parents won't say, hey, we're leaving. They usually just leave, and then we get a school that reaches out and says, we need your records. So when we think we have so many students, we actually, as of today, we have a lot more typically than we really do have by the time we get to October 1. So this week and next week, we'll sort out probably 80–90% of that equation, and then you get a little back and forth all the way until you get to October 1. And that would be then half of our ed fund budget based on ADM, and then of course February 1 is the second count. The problem with February or the spring is we do have mid-semester graduates, we do have a lot of out-of-district students, and so there is a little bit of movement that takes place more than possibly a district that's mostly in-district, so to speak. So we do always have a little lower number in the spring, at least historically. So we try to balance that out as we sit and try to speculate this summer what that number is going to look like holistically. That's it. Are there any questions?
Jake, it's not a glamorous job, but we appreciate you doing it. You put a lot
Thanks.
you put a lot into it.
Thank you.
Good to be able to trust you.
Thanks.
So if you look at his last page, that's all the notes that he actually just talked about, but he put those in writing for you. But this is really just a summary. This is the strategy and what we're looking at as far as what our anticipated and hoped revenue will be and what that will look like moving forward for what will then be the hearing, and then of course bringing it to the school board for approval for the budget itself later this fall. Any questions? That's a lot. Matt bludgeoned us with a lot of info. It was very good.
Yeah.
But, and then Jacob did a little cleanup work. But it's really the whole purpose of this is to be able to just sit back and in an open forum be able to have any conversation so that we do provide transparency to our community as well. Everything's on the table. And if you don't have questions, that's okay. If you want to digest some of this, we can go over this at any time at your leisure. Jacob and myself are at your disposal. We can argue with Matt a little bit. Hearing no questions, and that would mean that we can conclude the meeting. So, meeting closed at 5:42. Thank you, everyone, in the gallery for coming. Appreciate it. It's been very, very informative and a good time. Thank you for technology for supporting us. And Matt, of course, thank you for your presentation as well.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.